What's up, everyone? After the corridors of power in the Ottoman palace, we now go to one of the oldest and most rigid social systems, right to the heart of the caste system in India. What would your life be like if you were born a Shudra in that era of India? A life where your fate was determined not by tribes or lords, but by the philosophy of karma from the moment of birth. Let's explore my life in this age of mandatory service and exclusion. Don't forget to like the video, and I truly enjoy reading your own what-if comments. Life was not just a physical birth. It began with a fateful stigma. Being born a Shudra meant that due to my actions in a previous life, karma, I was obligated to serve in this life. I was at the very bottom of the social hierarchy. My role was to serve the higher castes Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. My legal rights were not much different from our slaves in Rome. My value before the law was measured solely by my physical labor. The order of the village was built upon this mandatory service role that I inherited by birth. For me, free will was limited only by the hope of ascending to a higher caste in the next life, samsara. My social position dictated living in the outskirts and the very bottom layer of the village. Shudra settlements were usually physically isolated from the main village center. Our homes were made of simple mud or thatch, and our access to clean water or adequate hygiene standards was restricted. While the main village shone with the temples and clean homes of the higher castes, we lived amidst dust and hardship. This physical separation was not just a housing issue, but a tangible manifestation of our religious and social impurity. I was a satellite orbiting a center to which I could never truly belong in every moment of my life. As a Shudra, my profession was determined by birth according to the Varna rules. This profession could be nothing other than serving the higher castes. I was obligated to perform farming, simple craftsmanship like pottery or manual labor. My labor was the backbone of society, but in return, I received neither respect nor fair compensation. I had no chance to change my profession or move into one belonging to a higher status. Mandatory servitude was not just a job description for me, but a moral obligation that defined every moment of my life. All my skills and efforts existed solely to serve the prosperity of the upper castes. My economic life was based on direct dependence and systematic exploitation by the higher castes. I was obligated to hand over most of my labor or harvest to my master, Kshatriya or Vaishya, without compensation. Owning land was either forbidden or severely restricted. Thus, I was perpetually in debt, and debt was a curse that spanned generations. Earning money meant nothing more than surviving and paying the interest on the debt. Economic independence was merely a dangerous illusion. Although this exploitation was presented as a religious necessity by the system, in reality, it was the only way for the upper castes to maintain their luxurious lives through my labor. Social exclusion was a physical pressure I felt in every moment of my life. The rule of maintaining physical distance from the higher castes was an absolute necessity for me. The belief that even the shadow of a Brahmin could bring them religious pollution restricted my movement. I was forbidden from walking on certain paths or during certain hours. I had to speak in a low voice and with respect. Even speaking loudly was considered an insult. These rigid rules were tangible manifestations of a system that denied my humanity. I was forbidden from using clean water sources, temples, and even certain marketplaces. Education and knowledge were the absolute monopoly of the higher castes for me. I had no chance to read, listen to, or participate in religious rituals related to the Vedas. Learning sacred knowledge or being literate was not only forbidden, but a crime carrying severe penalties. The only things I was allowed to learn were the master's commands and the practical skills required by my profession. This prohibition on knowledge not only chained my mind and soul, but also ensured that I accepted my status as faithful and correct. Literacy or intellectual curiosity was a great and dangerous luxury for a Shudra like me. Marriage could only take place within the Shudra caste. This was the rule of endogamy, and violating this rule would lead to the ostracization of the entire community and very severe punishments. Intercaste love or marriage was society's greatest taboo and was viewed as a crime that would disrupt the social order. For me, marriage was less about love or romance and more about ensuring the continuity of the community and the caste. My spouse could not elevate my social position or my profession. They shared the same mandatory service fate as me. These rigid marriage rules were proof that my social mobility was zero. My primary duty was to serve the Kshatriyas, warriors, rulers. I would farm their lands, serve in their households, and provide logistical support for their military campaigns. The Kshatriya class held absolute authority over me, and their word was law. While working on their lands, like a slave in Rome, I could be subjected to violence and arbitrary punishments. For me, serving the Kshatriyas was not just a job. It was being a part of their warrior. Honor was the invisible support mechanism that made their way of life possible. Caste inequality in law was the cornerstone of the justice system. The punishment for a crime committed by a Brahmin or Kshatriya was not the same as one committed by me. Punishments for me were much more severe. My right to speak in court was restricted. Generally, the testimony of a witness from a higher caste was more valid than my defense. Defying a higher caste was equivalent to rebellion. This legal system officially registered my inherent worthlessness. For me, justice depended on the arbitrary decisions of the master or the village council panchayat, and those decisions always protected the interests of the upper caste. Life, even within the Shudra caste, was divided by a hierarchy of impure labor. While we performed cleaner manual labor, lower groups, Dalits, untouchables, were forced to do the most ostracized and impure jobs, like leather work, garbage collection, and cleaning dead animals. This showed that even within my own caste, there was social division, and there was always someone else below. This hierarchy further stratified economic and social exclusion. Even for a Shudra like me, avoiding the shadow or touch of a Dalit was mandatory. This was the painful evidence of how deeply the system's belief in spiritual impurity was ingrained. Since we were forbidden from entering the high caste temples, our religious worship turned towards folk deities, small village shrines, and cults. These places of worship lacked the rituals of the Brahmins, but gave us a direct spiritual connection and a sense of community. These alternative religious paths gave us the hope that as long as we lived according to Dharma, meaning fulfilling our caste duty, we would be reborn into a higher caste in the next life. For me, worship was not just faith in God, but also an investment in hope for the future that alleviated the pain of this difficult life. Our clothing and jewelry instantly displayed my status and poverty to the outside world. I was obligated to wear simple, coarse, and unostentatious fabrics. I was forbidden from wearing luxury jewelry, using bright colors, or carrying elaborate items. This was the privilege of the higher caste. These restrictions not only zeroed out my social mobility, but also ensured that a Brahmin recognized me at a glance and stayed away. For me, clothes were not just a covering, but a constant reminder of the poverty and servitude I inherited by birth. Village governance was completely closed to participation by Shudras like me. The Panchayat village council consisted of village elders and usually members of the higher castes. My right to speak was either non-existent or limited to a humble, restricted vote. Important decisions like water distribution, taxation, and land disputes were made in an environment where I was excluded. This ensured that decisions always protected the interests of the upper castes. For me, village governance was merely an authority figure I had to obey, not a place where I was represented. Defying the system or disrespecting a Brahmin meant disaster for me. The punishment was not only physical beating, it risked the social boycott and ostracization of my entire community. Social boycott meant being forbidden from accessing water, finding food, and trading with others. This was a condemnation to a slow death for our community. For me, this meant that even speaking up for honesty or honor came with a great price. Survival required humility, obedience, and silence. Water sources were the places where the most brutal rule of the caste system was enforced. We were forbidden from using the wells, ponds, and common resting areas used by the higher castes. Our wells were usually located in the furthest and most contaminated areas of the village. Approaching a well used by a Brahmin or my shadow falling upon the water would pollute that water and lead to severe punishments. For me, drinking water was not a simple act, but a matter of constant vigilance, risking the violation of caste rules at any moment. Even in the most important moments of my life, the wedding and funeral ceremonies, there were strict rules. Our ceremonies had to be simple, unostentatious, and restricted, unlike the elaborate rituals of the higher castes. The number of guests, music, and clothing in our weddings were limited by law. These restrictions were a reminder of how little value our social status and societal presence held. For me, these ceremonies were not just tradition, but the embodiment of the social rules we were obligated to respect. Acquiring property was nothing more than a dream for me. Shudras were either forbidden from owning land or allowed only under severe restrictions. Constant indebtedness and the obligation to work the master's land entirely eliminated my chance for economic advancement. Saving money for me was limited to a small peculium that could be seized at the master's arbitrary will. This restriction condemned me and my children to a multi-generational economic cycle. Living with a derogatory language, imperative commands, and dishonorable terms of address from the higher castes was a part of my daily life. Receiving respect was just a dream for me. Every conversation was a constant reminder of my inferior status. I had to bow before a Brahmin, avoid eye contact, and speak in a low voice. This humiliation not only crushed my pride, but also reinforced the spiritual superiority of the caste system. For me, honor was a luxury I could only find within my own community, not outside. The dream of exiting the system was possible only through the bhakti path. Living fully according to Dharma caste duty was my only hope in this life. This would grant me a chance to ascend to a higher caste in the next life, samsara. Bhakti devotion gave us the spiritual strength to endure the hardships of this life. For me, this hope was the only logic for survival and facing humiliation every day. This belief allowed me to accept my mandatory servitude and offered me spiritual consolation. Towards the end of my life, winds of change began to blow with colonial rule and the growth of new cities. The anonymous life in cities caused the rigid rules of the caste system to loosen slightly. Stepping on a Brahmin's shadow in cities might no longer result in instant punishment. Missionary activities and new ideas began to question the traditional order. For Sudras like me, this change meant a new hope and the possibility of loosening the old chains. My life was governed by strict rules, but my children had a chance to dream of a future outside the system. So that was my life of mandatory service, exclusion, and hope at the very bottom rung of the caste system. After the golden chains of the Ottoman palace, here we saw how brutal fate determined by birth truly is. After this journey, I realized how sacred social mobility and equal opportunities are today. Which challenging era should we visit in our next video? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this alternate history journey, please don't forget to subscribe and like the video. See you in the next adventure. Take care, and remember, the chains of destiny can be broken